Merry Christmas, everybody. It is December 14th, 10 days until Christmas Eve. I don't know if you have plans for Christmas Eve. We are going to be hosting two amazing experiences here, one at 5 p.m., one at 7 p.m. If you can weave that into your tradition and celebration on that day, I highly encourage you to participate in that moment together with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We are knee-deep in this series we've called Arrival, which is taking a look at some of the bits and pieces spoken about the arrival of Jesus in human infant form years and years and years before his arrival. We've worked our way through the themes of peace, the themes of hope, and this week we're going to look at love, because why not? Let's talk about love. Let me ask you this question. How do you know that you're loved? If you had to answer that, what would you say? How do you know that you are loved? There are an estimated 8.296 billion people on our planet as I speak right now. Each one of us wants to know the answer to that question. We want to matter to somebody. There's this tension. If we don't have our people or the place that we belong to or the people that surround us, that we're like, well, I don't know if I matter to anybody. This is why love is so important. Love is something that even if we've never learned that word, we look for in terms of belonging and connection with those around us. So we're going to talk about this, the arrival of love and what it means and represents. Why I say the arrival of love is because Jesus himself embodies love fully. This is what it says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8. But anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. If you do not know love, if you do not love, you do not know God, because God is love. The arrival of love is about the arrival of God, the focus and the emphasis on who Jesus is. We're going to be parachuting into an unfolding narrative in the nation of Israel's history by looking at some text from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah was this prophetic voice in this community. And what a prophetic voice was is they were a representative of God to the people. That was their job and their role. They were selected out of all of the rest of the Israelite community. They were chosen by God to be his spokesperson to the people. When Jeremiah is fulfilling this role as prophet to the community of Israel, the nation itself, there was a couple of things that are good to keep in mind. It was a divided kingdom framework to start. That meant that the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah were not actually looked over by the same leadership or the same king. Jeremiah was a prophet to the southern kingdom of Judah, the part of the broader people group that is the Israelite community. And 100 years before Jeremiah's arrival and kind of functional role as prophet, this community, the kingdom of Judah, witnessed the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, be overtaken by the Babylonian Empire. Their prophetic voice that was working with them was a man named Isaiah. And Isaiah speaks a lot about the arrival of love, the arrival of Jesus throughout the book that bears the same name. And Jeremiah, 100 years later, is speaking to this southern group of people around the arrival of love and around hope. Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet because a lot of his message is hard to understand. It's hard to hear because he talks about impending doom and gloom. Yay. Like, imagine that was your job. You're an insurance adjuster, and all you get to do is tell people that they aren't getting the money that they expect. Anybody up for that? Better yet, you work for the Canada Revenue Agency. You owe us more money. That's the kind of tension emotionally and the angst around that probably would occupy a little bit of his framework as he's delivering these messages over and over and over and over and over again. But littered throughout those messages of doom and gloom are these inferences of hope. And we're going to look at one of those from the 31st chapter of the book of Jeremiah, so towards the back half of his text, looking at the first 9 verses. It says this: In that day, says the Lord, I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they will be my people. This is what the Lord says. Those who survive the coming destruction will find blessings even in the barren land, for I will give rest to the people of Israel. Long ago the Lord said to Israel, I have loved you, my people, with an everlasting love. With unfailing love I have drawn you to myself. I will rebuild you, my virgin Israel. You will be my happy and you will again be happy and dance merrily with your tambourines. Again, you will plant your vineyards on the mountains of Samaria and eat from your own gardens there. The day will come when watchmen will shout from the hill country of Ephraim, come, let us go up to Jerusalem to worship the Lord our God. Now this is what the Lord says, sing with joy for Israel. Shout for the greatest of nations. Shout out with praise and joy. Save your people, O Lord, the remnant of Israel. For I will bring them from the north and from the distant corners of the earth. I will not forget the blind and the lame, the expectant mothers and women in labor. A great company will return. Tears of joy will stream down their faces, and I will lead them home with great care. They will walk beside quiet streams and on smooth paths where they will not stumble. For I am Israel's father, and Ephraim my oldest child. So this is this message of hope stuck in the middle of all these other tensions that Jeremiah is speaking about, and it's referring to the arrival of love. Now, love is a person in God himself. It's a part of his nature. But the entity of love, the experience of love, causes us to shift and change and move in various ways. For those of you who have had friendships over the years that have lasted more than 2 or 3 decades, you understand that relationship or that love link has shaped you and refined you and moved you from one place to another. And so I'm going to talk about 3 movements that love invites us into over the long term as we encounter. 3 movements that this group of people, originally hearing this promise of restoration in and amongst the doom and gloom and how they're going to be occupied by a foreign entity for a period of time, what they would have hung on to and grasped to in the moments of tension and fear and frustration and unknown that they would have experienced. The first movement is this: love moves us from weeping to hope. Love moves us from weeping to hope. I am not talking about the practice of spiritual bypassing. The practice of spiritual bypassing is burying what we are experiencing so that we can just cling to maybe a verse or a word or a hopeful outcome that we are looking forward to. Spiritual bypassing is about not dealing with whatever tensions emotionally, physically, intellectually we're experiencing in the moment. We pretend they don't exist, and we just keep moving forward. This is not what love invites us into. When love moves us from weeping to hope, it's a long-term restorative process where we can understand that our pains, our wounds, our frustrations, our tensions, all those things, over a period of time, we can see God's hand working in it and through it. I've had the privilege of speaking to people who have been wounded in all sorts of different ways. I spoke to a widow this past week who has lived the last 25 years on her own. And as we speak about that relationship she once had with her spouse partner, she still wells up. She still grieves the loss of that intimacy. However, she has a hopeful posture and presence and outlook. She hasn't spiritually bypassed the reality of this is a great pain that I have dealt with in my life. But she trusts in a God who is all good and all loving, despite the pain and the tension that she faces. I've had the privilege of speaking to parents who've lost a child. Probably one of the most devastating pains anybody can ever experience on this side of eternity. And as God has carried them through that, multiple decades worth, as God has carried them through that, They have themselves experienced this movement and this shift from weeping to hope. The movement that love invites us into, from weeping to hope, doesn't mean we will not weep again. It means that in our tears and in our tensions and in our pains, we will find comfort. We will find hope. This was particularly important for this southern group of Israel, the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, because they had seen for 100 years their northern neighbors, their own family and friends, the reality of what it looked like to live under the tyrannical rule of Babylon. They've heard stories, they witnessed events, and now their own prophetic voice, Jeremiah, is saying, get ready, because we're going that way too. The weeping, the wailing, the frustration, all of those things would have been very real realities. We're not talking about just a policy adjustment. We're talking about a whole circumstance shift, where somebody comes into your space and says, what you have is no longer yours, it is now mine. And you must pay tribute to me in order to have your very life. So this movement from weeping to hope would have been a slow burn process. And the reality is the people that would have encountered the need for this shift originally would not have seen the culmination of what this looked like until generations later. For 100+ years, they did not see the long-term trajectory of what God was doing. In fact, about 600 years later is where we get the arrival of Jesus. The movement from weeping towards hope is not an instantaneous thing. That's what spiritual bypassing promises us, instantaneous relief. It's a slow, progressive movement towards hope and wholeness, even in the midst of the chaos. Sometimes what's given to us in the moment isn't meant for us to experience in our lifetime. It's meant to be experienced generationally over time. We came through the Remembrance Day season. We celebrate all the women and men who offered up their lives willingly, in the case of us Canadians, so that we could have freedom. I don't know if they would have had the long-term outlook to understand what that looked like. But they saw it as worthwhile and valuable enough to invest who they were in order to offer future generations that they may have never interacted with, nor may be related to, that gift. This is the first movement of love, from weeping to hope. The pains that you are experiencing are never wasted. It feels frustrating. It feels isolating. It feels defeating. And yet, God is growing something in you, not just for you, but for those, the benefit of those who follow you, whether they even know you or not, in the future. Love moves us from weeping to hope. There's another posture that love invites us into, or movement, and love moves us from despair to determination. From despair to determination. A prophetic utterance like this from these verses would have been fear-creating at the very least. As people rationalize, okay, what does it mean that we're going to lose everything? What does it mean that people are going to come after us? And then having these moments and these glimpses of God going like, just remember that even in the midst of all of that, my love isn't going to fail. I've always loved you, and I always will pursue you. I read a study this week about video games. I grew up in the 1990s. I was a 90s kid. Any 90s kids in here? Come on, grunge rock, let's go. That's where all the flannel comes from, if you wonder. 90s, that's where it is. And it compared the video gaming culture of the 90s to the video game culture of like the 2010s and the 2020s. And it was a fascinating study, not because I was looking for ways to justify a gaming habit, but fascinating from a sociological perspective. The purpose of video games in the 1990s was not just purely entertainment. The games were designed with puzzles and challenges in mind in order to grow certain aspects of a person's character. So, for example, you would meet a final boss in Super Mario Brothers, and you would have to learn strategies on how to overcome defeat. In fact, if you were lucky enough and you had a subscription to one of the cheat code magazines that came out multiple years after the release of the game, you could follow a guided tour on how to defeat that boss. But if you didn't, you had to figure it out on your own. You had to go to your community, share ideas and thoughts, try again, get up and go again. How many of you threw a controller at a TV screen? Or just broke one out of the rage, right? Just boom. I hate this game. Hey, Mom, I need a new controller. Why? No comment. The gaming culture of the 2010s and 2020s is very different. Many of the games are built in an open source world framework. What that means is there's no real challenge that you have to overcome. You can do whatever you want in that simulated environment. If you want to run a convenience store, you can do that. There's really no purpose to it other than you're doing it. If you want to have an open source place like Minecraft and build an ice rink structure or another architectural design, you can do that. If you want to go raid somebody else's space, you can do that too. You can plunder and take all their stuff. What's crazy is that you can do, in this open source framework, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and there's no real necessary challenge associated with your progression in the game. What's interesting about that is I think that it speaks to a little bit about our culture as humankind, how we are built and grown and developed. You've probably heard me say this before. I will say it again. When we encounter tension, the tension we encounter isn't always bad. What we choose to do with the tension we encounter makes all the difference. If you are a bodybuilder, a weightlifter, tension is a very good thing. If you're looking to get toned in your physical framework or build mass, muscle mass, you need more and greater tension. Now, what the crazy thing is that tension has to be under control, otherwise you will get injured in the process. But without that tension, you will not grow and develop. This is what love invites us into, moving us from despair to determination, helping us understand that the tension that we are facing is building in us something good and new and purposeful over time. We don't like the reality of that. We don't like the reality of that growth trajectory that's going to call something new out of us. Love reshapes us along the way. It doesn't leave us in the moment of who we are. It's not an open source world that says, do whatever you want, however you want to do it, with no consequences. That doesn't shape us in the area of determination or resilience. Far too often, what happens in our world today, culturally speaking, is we encounter something we didn't plan for and we give up way too early. We quit. Thursday night, our dryer stopped working. It was moving. It was doing all the bells and whistles and even giving me a signal of like, hey, I'm done, but it was not drying the clothes. There was no hot air. It's not a gas dryer. It's an electric dryer. So I knew it wasn't a gas-based issue. Something deeper had to be going on. So I did my research. I looked at all these YouTube videos and I determined that it must be a thermal fuse issue. It was no longer producing heat. It must be a thermal fuse issue. I had this double stack washer and dryer pulled out and put back in 3 or 4 different times over the next 36 hours, trying to solve the problem on my own. I called a local technician. They said they could come December 24th. I said, I have 7 people in my house. I will be buried in laundry and may not make it to December 24th. And they said, have you thought about ordering the part yourself? I said, that's a novel idea. The part arrived yesterday at about 4:15 p.m. We were up and running by 5 p.m. Let's go. It was a lot of fun. And I said this to my wife, and I don't care if it makes me look weak. After that started running, I was thankful, and then I had tears in my eyes. It was a sense of relief that I didn't know was bothering me to the degree that it was bothering me. Now, I get it. That's just a broken dryer. Pretty nominal when some of the other things that we encounter and deal with, like job loss that's unexpected, a health diagnosis we didn't plan for, a financial free fall that we didn't account for in our retirement or even in our non-retirement. I understand that. But love moves us from despair to determination. It's growing something in us, a layer of resilience that is absolutely necessary for not only our survival, but for the survival and well-being of those who come behind us. We are being built, we are being shaped for a purpose. When God gives you a gift, that gift is not just for you. That gift is meant to flow through you to benefit other people. When God gives you a gift, it's not just for you. It's meant to flow through you for the benefit of other people. That is the shift from despair to determination. Because here's what happens. When God gives us a gift, we're like, oh, awesome, thank you. I appreciate it. I want more. Give me another one. The gift is more about other people than it is about you. Think about how we were given the gift of love, the gift of salvation. It comes through Jesus. The gift of salvation comes through Jesus, because of Jesus. That gift of salvation was not just about Jesus. It was about you and it was about me. It had generational impact. And he realized that when he's hanging on the cross, the vapors of his life are fading, and he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Speaking specifically to the Roman soldiers who are mocking him, who've betrayed him, who've beaten him, who've abused him. And he says, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's the shift from despair to determination. That's the shift of resiliency. Generationally, the nation of Israel needed to understand this element of love, this movement from despair to determination. They couldn't just hang on the hopes of the past, the stories of how God rescued their people out of slavery, and after moment and moment of setback, they needed to walk their own story and journey of hope-filled, love-purposed, peace-oriented movement. This is where we are in 2025, here in this Advent season. Whatever you are facing in the moment is not necessarily a curse. God is inviting you to consider what the movement and the shift from despair to determination might look like. He's inviting you to become more resilient. Why? I don't yet know, other than whatever he's placing inside you isn't for you alone. And if it's true that this whole gaming culture reality is used to a free-flowing, no setback-oriented, no failure reality, then there's going to be a whole generation of individuals that need to learn the value of resiliency, of being developed and grown through failing forward. What better gift than to have a group of people to walk alongside them, not critique them, walk alongside them into these uncharted waters and territories. God was preparing this community for something that they didn't necessarily choose for themselves, but for something. And he's doing the very same thing with us here today. This movement from despair to determination, this progression that happens over time. Not necessarily instantaneously, but over time in a micro movement, a micro shift here and there. There's a third movement that this text and love in general invites us into, and that's the movement from being closed to being open. From being closed to being open. See, up until this point, the southern kingdom of Judah, they could look at their northern friends of Israel and be like, hey, you know what? At least we're not like them. Hey, you know what? At least we're not having the Babylonians take everything that we own and have to pay tribute. Now Jeremiah is saying, just get ready because it will be you very soon. What does a closed mentality or a closed life look like? An unwillingness to recognize the movement or the hand of God in us, through us, or around us. That's what closed looks like. An unwillingness to recognize the movement or the hand of God in us, around us, or through us. We're so caught up in our own despair, or we're so caught up in our own stuff that we cannot and will not ever choose to see that God might be birthing something new in us for his purposes. Now, I get it. Easy for me to say. I'm not somebody that suffers with a lifelong medical condition that I have to monitor with injections of drugs or anything like that. Like, I get that. My life is pretty awesome in so many ways. I mean, like the worst thing I have to do is pay bills that aren't mine to pay. Like, I get that. It can seem a little bit superfluous as I might be sharing out with you about this reality because you're like, I'm in a different space than you. I understand that. I'm just a mouthpiece today. I'm a mouthpiece today. And my own versions of those tensions of despair and weeping are very real, just as yours are very real. But it's way too easy for us when we encounter something that we haven't prepared for, haven't planned for, and wouldn't choose for ourselves to go into what I'll call ostrich mode. We stick our heads in the sand and we don't encounter or engage with anything else happening in us, around us, or even through us. A closed mentality is saying to our Creator, we do not trust you. We don't trust you. And it's okay to actually say that at times. When you encounter something that you haven't planned for, you haven't prepared for, you don't know how to navigate. It's okay to say, like, I don't know what you're doing here, God. It's hard to trust you in this moment. I get that. That's a very real, raw, emotional response. That's okay. Living and staying in that place is not going to give you the relief that you crave. Love is asking you to move from closed to open. To consider that even though you're facing this setback, this unknown, this tension, this turbulence, that there's something bigger at work in you and through you. Because even the gift of suffering isn't always about you. Even the gift of suffering isn't always about you. The gift of suffering that Jesus displays for us was not just about Jesus. It was about us. I'm not sure when the leaders and the community in the southern tribe of Judah caught that mindset. I'm not sure when it finally crystallized for them, where they have to live from an open-based framework instead of a closed-based framework. But I know it happened. Because the curiosity and the wonder and the waiting for the arrival of Messiah still existed generations later. In fact, those that are following the Judaism trajectory even today that deny the messianic reality of Jesus are still waiting in a posture of hopefulness for the arrival of a Messiah. They've just missed the reality that Jesus is who they're waiting for. Love is a powerful thing. When love arrives, it causes you to do all sorts of amazing things. It invites you into these movements from weeping to hope, from despair to determination, from being closed to being open. And so I want to toss out to you over these next 10 days the love challenge. The love challenge. If it's true that whatever God has gifted to us, whether we would choose it or not, isn't actually always about us, it's for somebody else, then why not be intentional in the way that we demonstrate this love for other people? So I've got 5 things for you to consider over this holiday Christmas season. As you encounter people you want to spend time with, and you encounter people that you don't want to spend time with, but you're related to them, so suck it up. Here's the first thing. I want you to do something. I want you to serve somebody. You see somebody struggling to put stuff into their car or shovel their driveway or cross the street or whatever it might be. Why don't you show up and lend a hand? Like, instead of complaining, instead of being soaked in bitterness, why don't we do something? If you're complaining about what is being cooked for the Christmas dinner meal, why don't you offer to help? If that offering is rebuffed, I know of other places that would love to have your gift and willingness to serve a meal of some kind to somebody who would be really thankful to be a recipient of that meal. Our Sunday Supper community program next Sunday is planning to feed a massive Christmas dinner. They're preparing for over 350. Do I have that right, Jeff? 350 individuals that will either eat in person, have takeouts, or deliveries. Do something. Engage. If you know a neighbor isn't going to have somebody to interact with on the holidays, maybe don't go invite them for dinner. Maybe that's too much for you, although that could be really helpful. Do something. Drop off dinner. Show up. Be present in somebody's life. Do something. Here's another thing that you could do. You could gift something. Hey, you could gift something. Sometimes for many of us, Christmas is all about giving or receiving gifts. You could do that. You could gift something like your time, your very presence, a conversation. You could gift something. What else could you do? Here's the third one. You could share in something. Slow down. Reject the hustle and bustle of the crazy, chaotic season that is, at times, Christmas, and share in something with somebody. Be present with them. Have a coffee. Have a tea. Have a breakfast sandwich. Breakfast all day at Tim Hortons. You can have them at 9:30 p.m. Share in something. This is a hard one for me. You can hug someone. For all you serial huggers out there, this is license and permission to hug people who want to be hugged. Who want to be hugged. I'll tell you what, though. We all need physical consoling at different times. Particularly those that are dealing with things they hadn't planned for in a holiday season that surfaces new emotional realities, like the person that they usually share in these traditions with is no longer here. And so you could do something like this. Could I give you a hug? And if they say no, don't hug them. But if they say yes, you got 2 options. You can halfway it, side hug. Actually, Daniel, why don't you come up here and demonstrate with me? Daniel loves hugs. We are praying for him about this character trait. It's a gap. No. So you could do this. The side hug, there. Or on occasion, with permission, from both parties. Now, the key is don't linger too long because then it gets weird. Like, it gets really weird. Honestly, as somebody who's not a natural hugger, I often think, are they ever going to let go? What sort of crazy things are going on right now? Honestly, a hug can make a difference. It can make a difference. And maybe that's how you can love somebody really intentionally this year, particularly somebody that you would be like, I don't know if I've ever hugged them before. You can be present in their world. Or this one, speak something. Speak something. It's ironic to me that around the holidays, one of two things surface. All the skeletons and the spider webs that people want to talk about, or all the other things that they don't want to talk about. The feelings of gratitude and thankfulness and hopefulness. I've lived this out in my world. I'm somebody that can use my words wisely, or I can use them as a weapon. That's the reality. And the hope that I have for my life, and the hope that I have for your lives, is that we wouldn't weaponize our words, but we'd use wisdom through our words. When my dad had a health crisis a number of years ago, where we didn't know if he was going to pull through, when he woke up from being intubated for over 10 days and started to rebuild his life, we made a promise to each other that we would speak words of hope into each other. Man, those first few times were really awkward. Like, hey, love you, hang up. Or whatever it might be. But sometimes the words that we speak will actually point to the hope or the despair that somebody else is wrestling with. Like, if you can speak words of encouragement and say, like, hey, this is where I see God at work in your life, through your life, and I've benefited personally from what I've seen him doing in your world. Do you know how encouraging that is? For somebody in particular that is loved through words, that will fuel them for a very long time. And our world and our culture is steeped in the reality of using our words to weaponize versus encourage. That's a love challenge. Do something, give something, share in something, hug someone, speak something. If love has changed you, why wouldn't we show up like this? What are you waiting for? Love has arrived. Let's live out love. Let me pray. Father, thank you for who you are. Thank you for how you love us. I pray that you would crystallize and catalyze inside of us anything that you want us to learn about the movement of love. Jesus, I pray for restoration. I pray for hopefulness. I pray that this Christmas season would be a springboard through which you would draw more and more people to yourself. As we're reminded in this text from Isaiah, that you would gather people from all over, from the north, south, east, west, and welcome them home, which means welcoming them into your presence. I thank you for the gift of love, and we can celebrate its arrival. May we never take it for granted that you have chosen us, and you continue to pursue us because we are your first love, image bearers that you created. Jesus, I ask that you would bless and protect us, and make your face shine upon us and be gracious to us. That you would turn your face towards us to grant us your favor and your peace wherever we go, with whomever we are with in that moment. We want to represent you and love and live like you, Jesus, always. Amen.